There is a question that has haunted every boardroom, every battlefield, every family kitchen at 2 a.m. when everything is falling apart. What does a real leader do, when there is nothing left to do? Not what they say in the speech. Not what's written in the biography. But in the actual moment, when the water is rising, when the people around them are screaming, and when every logical, rational instinct in the human body is screaming, run. What do? History has given us generals who crumbled. Presidents who vanished. CEOs who blamed the board. Captains who abandoned ship. But 2,000 years ago, on a body of water called the Sea of Galilee, a carpenter from Nazareth gave the world a masterclass in crisis leadership that no Harvard Business School syllabus has ever fully captured. And the most extraordinary part? He was asleep when it started. The Sea of Galilee is not what most people imagine when they picture a Bible story. It is not a gentle pond with lily pads and soft winds. It is a 166 square kilometer freshwater lake sitting 213 meters below sea level, cupped between mountain ranges that act like a natural funnel for atmospheric pressure. Fishermen who worked this water for a living, men like Peter, James, and John, had watched colleagues disappear into it. They had pulled bodies from it. They knew, better than anyone, what this lake was capable of. So when Jesus of Nazareth, their teacher, their rabbi, the man they had left their livelihoods to follow, said, "Let us cross over to the other side," these men looked at the sky. They assessed the weather. They calculated the risk. And they got in the boat anyway. That is the first leadership principle hiding in plain sight in this story, and almost everyone misses it. The disciples didn't follow Jesus because the conditions were perfect. They followed because the person was trustworthy. Leadership doesn't recruit followers with guarantees. It recruits them with presence. But here is what the text tells us next, and this is where the story takes its first unexpected turn. Jesus, exhausted from a day of teaching crowds, healing the sick, and pouring himself out for others, fell asleep. Not anxious. Not pacing the deck. Not rehearsing a plan for what to do if the weather turned. Asleep. On a cushion. In the stern of the boat. The Bible says they departed in the evening. Which means by the time they were fully out on open water, it was dark. And that is when it came. The Greek word used in Matthew's account for this storm is seismos, the same root word we use today for seismic. An earthquake. This was not a passing shower. This was not an inconvenient drizzle. This was the kind of storm that makes experienced fishermen, men who had navigated these waters their entire lives, believe they are going to die. And here is what is psychologically devastating about that detail: expertise did not protect them. This is the crisis that no one talks about. The most dangerous moment in any high-pressure situation is not when amateurs panic. It's when the experts do. When Peter panics, Peter, the man who had fished this sea since childhood, the man who knew every current, every wind pattern, every warning sign this water could produce, when he starts to lose it, that is the signal that the situation has exceeded the boundaries of human competence. The waves were now breaking over the boat. The vessel was filling with water. The Greek account in Mark is almost cinematic in its specificity: the boat was already full. They were sinking. And somewhere in the stern, wrapped in a cushion, the Son of God was still asleep. So they did what any reasonable, terrified human being would do. They woke him up. "Teacher, don't you care that we're dying?" Think about that sentence for a moment. Don't read past it too quickly. These are not strangers. These are men who have watched Jesus heal lepers, cast out demons, restore sight to the blind. They have seen what he is capable of. And in their most desperate moment, their instinct was not to say, "We know you'll handle this." Their instinct was, "Do you even care?" That is the second masterclass hiding in this story, and it is one of the most brutally honest portraits of human psychology ever committed to text. Pressure does not just create fear. It creates doubt. It makes people question the one thing that should be unquestionable. Even the people closest to you, the ones who have watched you perform miracle after miracle, will ask, "Do you even care?" the moment the storm gets bad enough. Every leader reading this has been in that boat. Every entrepreneur at 3 a.m. watching their funding evaporate. Every parent standing in a hospital corridor. Every pastor whose congregation is bleeding away. Every manager whose team is falling apart and looking at them asking the same wordless question those disciples asked. Don't you care? Here is where most sermons stop. Most retellings jump straight to the miracle, the calm, the wind ceasing, the glassy water. And they lose everything. Because what Jesus does before he speaks to the storm is the most important part of this entire story. He wakes up. He stands up. And he looks at his team first. The gospel accounts are layered with this. Before he rebukes the wind and the waves, there is an exchange with the disciples. He sees their faces. He assesses the room, the boat. He doesn't immediately perform. He doesn't grandstand. He doesn't immediately prove himself. He sees them. And then, he turns to the water. Peace. Be still. 4 syllables. 2 words in the original Greek, syopa. Pathomoso. Be silent. Be muzzled. And the text says, the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Not a gradual calm. Not a slow easing of the weather. An immediate great calm. The kind of stillness that is more shocking than the storm itself. Because here is the plot twist that nobody ever preaches. The storm obeying was not the most remarkable thing that happened on that boat. The most remarkable thing was what happened to the disciples in the aftermath. The Bible says they were filled with great fear. Not relief. Not joy. Fear. A different kind of fear than the one the storm had produced. Because the storm had produced panic. But this produced awe. And Jesus turns to them and asks the question that still echoes 2,000 years later. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Here is what the greatest leaders in human history have understood that most people never learn. The storm was never the enemy. The storm was the curriculum. Jesus did not fall asleep on that boat because he was indifferent. He fell asleep because he understood something his disciples did not yet have access to, an unshakable internal calm that the external environment cannot touch. This is the 3rd leadership masterclass, and it is perhaps the rarest quality in any organization, any family, any team in the world today. Psychologists call it differentiated leadership. The ability to remain emotionally non-reactive in the presence of a reactive system. When everyone else escalates, the leader de-escalates, not by suppressing emotion, but by being so rooted in something deeper than the situation that the situation cannot define them. Jesus sleeping was not negligence. It was the lesson. He was showing them, before he ever spoke a word to the storm, what the answer looked like. This is how you carry yourself when the water is rising. This is what it looks like to be at peace when the world is not. And when the moment came, when his presence was required, he didn't rush. He didn't perform anxiety. He didn't convene a committee. He stood, he assessed, he addressed. Peace. Be still. And here is the smart twist that will reframe everything you thought you knew about this story. The words he spoke to the storm. He spoke them to his disciples immediately after. Why are you so afraid? Peace, be still, spoken to human hearts. The same authority that silenced the Sea of Galilee was the same authority he directed at their fear. Because to Jesus, a panicking human heart and a raging storm were the same category of problem. Disorder that needed a voice of order. A shaking that needed a stillness. And this is the most profound leadership principle embedded in this 2,000-year-old story. Great leaders do not just solve the external problem. They stabilized the internal environment of the people around them. The storm stopping was a miracle. But 12 men finding their courage again. That was a movement. You are going to face a storm. If you are a leader of a company, a family, a team, a community, you are already in one. Or you just left one. Or you are about to enter one. And the question will not be, can you fix it? The question will be, what does your face look like when you can't? Because your team is not watching your strategy in the storm. They are watching your posture. They are watching whether you go to pieces or whether something in you holds. They are watching your face in the dark and asking the oldest question in human nature. Does our leader know something we don't? Jesus on that boat knew something they didn't. Not a method. Not a technique. He knew who he was. And when you know who you are, when your identity is not built on circumstances, when your peace is not dependent on the forecast, you can sleep in the middle of a seismic storm and wake up ready to speak to it. The Sea of Galilee did not calm because Jesus performed perfectly. It calmed because he spoke. And sometimes, that is all leadership is. One voice. In the dark. That says, peace, be still.